Hello traders, Cousin Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com on October the 18th, Sunday. With this video, we will look at the indices which did well this week, but not clearly as well as last week or the week before. We had a 9-day surge higher from the last week of September, culminating in a small consolidation, pulling back to the 50-period moving average on the New York Stock Exchange, and then we pushed higher and above recent highs at 10,362.26. The indices did fairly well. New York Stock Exchange high-low is moving higher at plus 72, which is really unusual. The amount of time it has surged higher without a pullback is remarkable. Tick, Tick-Q, both rising. NYSE as well as NASI are both rising. Breath, no MADs or MDDs, but the New York Stock Exchange high-low percent is up big on Friday and looking very good. CPC near the red zone for equities, so that's a little bit of a bummer. The New York Stock Exchange composite is about 250 points from resistance overhead and 150 points from its upper Bollinger Bands. Now that could easily be hit in one day on the New York Stock Exchange. Currencies, US dollar is at the lower range versus the yen, not looking as strong. Bonds, TLT is holding. The 10E, the 20, the 50, the 200, it's above all of those. And the weekly, the 10 EMA is rising and prices above those moving averages. Commodities, we have crude oil off a bit last week. We had a pullback. That's incorrect. That should be the 20 EMA. Copper was off a little bit and gold was higher. Sectors, we see mixed results with many of them pushing higher off of the green zone. XLF in particular breaking an 8-week downtrend. That's something we should keep an eye on. MACD is greater than 0 and STO is at the 63 level. So we could see higher prices on the banks and financials. And then of course we'll look at some IBD50 setups through the lens of the 10E STO MACD setup. Starting off with the New York Stock Exchange Composite Index, we are approaching some resistance. However, note this curve is fairly large, and 10,700 is right around the resistance area that we were looking at. Now, the other thing to consider is slow STOs turning up, and note the high-low index. The fact that it's moved higher for such a long time, an inflection point in the near future wouldn't be out of the ordinary. Coinciding possibly with some of these resistance levels. So just keep that in mind going into the week. It's 2,000 stocks, so it's something we should consider. Switching to the SPY daily, the green area is just a delineation for my reference in terms of the sideways range. Now we have a Kirby pocket overhead right up to around the 205.25 area, which we pointed out. We've broken this trend. We're bouncing off the 10 EMA last week on Wednesday, Thursday. Volume increased, slow STO turned back up, MACD is positive, and tick is moving higher as well. So this looks good for at least the next day or two, depending on how long it takes us to get to this level up here. Remember the previous chart, New York Stock Exchange, we had about 150 to 200 points before we start to see resistance overhead. And of course also consider the 10 EMA is above the 20 and the 30, which indicates we are in an uptrend. We could see a pullback to the 10 EMA. That's certainly not out of the realm of possibilities as a second scenario. Looking at the SPY 60-minute, we're above resistance levels, and here's where the Kirby starts to take control. Price action has an easier time moving higher. However, we see STO is starting to embed in the red zone. That can continue. Obviously, this is a bound indicator. The 5-1 duration is turning back up. MACD is positive, and so is tick. So just keep that in mind. Have a 60-minute chart ready on Monday morning when you start trading. Here is the NASDAQ 100. We are above the 200 period, the 50, and the 10 period. We're at the upper Bollinger Bands just overhead. We have some resistance. We could pop above that level and try the 44.50 area. Volume looks decent. MACD is above the zero line, and Stow is in the red zone. Remember, that can stay embedded as well, like it did back here and over here when prices continued to surge higher back in February. So that's not out of the realm of possibilities. Of course, we could get rejected here and pull back to the rising 10 EMA, and we'll wait for the 50 EMA to turn back up just for a confirmation in the next couple of weeks. RUT and IWM didn't do as well. As you remember, they were down a little bit on the week. We are still above resistance. Stow is turning up. Maybe this is the week that small caps can surge up to this upper Bollinger Band and some higher levels of resistance. MACD is positive and above the zero line. The Dow Jones Composite, which is comprised of stocks in the industrials, transports, and utilities sectors. Note, it is above all of the moving averages. Bollinger Bands continue to expand, and we see resistance overhead. Stow is turning back up, and MACD is positive. So for the most part, these 60 to 65 stocks in the composite are continuing to show signs of strength. We had a nice 9-day move, pull back to the 10 EMA, found buyers, and then we pushed higher. We're above the 130 EMA, the 6-month moving average. VIX continues to drop. We're not in the red zone yet. We could hit that zone obviously Monday or Tuesday. That's something we need to consider as we start the new week. VIX VXV is firmly in the red zone, however, so with the S&P 500 nearing resistance overhead, we have a 10 EMA crossing through the 50 period moving average. We are likely going to see a short-term inflection point here, probably at resistance. Best case scenario is we flag out. Second scenario is we pull back a little bit and then resume higher into the best months of the year, and perhaps a Santa Claus rally. The NASDAQ, McClellan Oscillator, NAMO continues to stay positive, similar to what we saw back here in February. Yet to reach the zero line. Note where that is here and on the zoom thumbnail. We have resistance coming in now, and we could see an inflection point on the NASDAQ as well. The McClellan Oscillator for the New York Stock Exchange Composite, we see similar information. Note this goes back to October, November. We have moved above the zero line, similar to what we saw back here in November, so it's very possible that the New York Stock Exchange could move higher this week. Very possible. We haven't seen an inflection yet in the NYSE, the summation index. We continue to just bolt higher. CPC, the put-call ratio, is nearing the red zone as we mentioned. It closed at 0.87. Watch for low values there intraday. Bollinger Bands are about 100 points overhead, 150 points, and then of course 200 points higher. We have resistance coming in on the New York Stock Exchange Composite. Focusing our attention on the US dollar for a moment, we're near the lower end of this range. Bollinger Bands are expanding. We have the 10 EMA descending. The 10 is below the 20 and the 30, so keep that in mind. Stow is turning back up, and MACD is negative. So we can see a little bit more weakness in the US dollar going into this week with the 10 EMA overhead. And of course, with the US dollar weaker, that means commodities should start to move higher. One of the reasons why gold is moving higher. The Japanese yen, as we see here, was starting to move higher. It moved lower Thursday and Friday. If you're bullish equities, you don't want to see the yen continue to move higher like it did back here in August. That's when we had this drop lower. MACD is above the zero line, however, and we're watching momentum. Stow is overbought. Keep an eye on the yen if you're trading equities this week. With the dollar moving towards the lower part of the range, we should expect to see commodities continue to move higher. Note the Kirby here on copper. Gold was moving higher as well last week, breaking above these levels. Now we have this volume by price band, congestion level to deal with. We get above this level here around 1210, 1215. We should see higher prices. Stowe is overbought, so we want to see that recycle and MACD remain above the zero line. Note the selling last week. Pondering crude for a moment, we continue to see higher lows, prices moving higher, so it looks like the call by Goldman Sachs for $20 oil isn't going to happen in the short term. Stowe is in the oversold zone and turning higher. This bodes well for the indices, as both have been moving together for the most part. Prices above the 10 EMA and the 20 as well as the 50. Price could get above this volume by price level, so this is an interesting area if you want to trade USO. I wouldn't be heavily short on the indices currently, with this indication that we could see higher prices on both. Junk bonds continue to surge off of these lows. Looks like risk is on. Stowe is turning higher, MACD's positive and above the zero line, and we only have the 50-period moving average to deal with and this descending trend line. Volume by price starts to increase overhead, but for the most part junk bonds look to be in favor this week and over the last 3 weeks. TLT, the daily, continues to hang out here. The weekly is drifting above the 10 and the 20, and above volume by price is a lot of support down here. Under price, MACD is above the zero line. Slow Stowe continues to move back up on the weekly chart. So bonds look pretty decent going into the week. We'll watch these as well for indications what might transpire against rising equity prices. Now remember, back in 2014 bonds continued to move higher, as did the S&P 500. So there's nothing that says that both can't move together. We've seen it most recently. Each week we look at the sectors for catalysts, whether they are bullish or bearish. This week we see a mixed bag. Most of these are overbought. Looking at XLF, for example, the interesting thing here is that we're breaking a 8-week trend. MACD is moving through the zero line, and Slow Stowe is about a day or two off of hitting the red zone. So with GS reporting decent earnings, at least it was perceived that way, and prices moving higher, you might want to check out the Goldman Sachs chart. There is a possibility we could run up to the 200-period moving average before seeing resistance. Looking at the real estate sector IYR, we can see that we're pushed right through the 200-period already. As this volume by price tapers off, we have a Kirby overhead. Very possible these could continue to move higher. Stowe is turning higher, and MACD is positive and above its zero line. So that's a good indication. This has been on lower volume, but price is above the rising 10 EMA and all the other moving averages as well. So this is pretty interesting for the real estate shares. Transports are having a little bit difficulty running into this volume by price resistance and this overhead trend line. The 200-period is overhead, as well as the Bollinger Bands. MACD's positive, and Slow Stowe is starting to look like it might turn this week. So this could add a catalyst for higher prices as well. Now, obviously, if it gets rejected at the trend line here, that would send out bearish signals for the week ahead. Remember, the materials sector was a good catalyst for positive price action over the last few weeks. We have flagged now. We're above the 50-period moving average, watching overhead resistance, and relative strength has started to move sideways. Energy we viewed similarly. A price surge, consolidation, resistance overhead, the 200-period overhead as well, and a little bit better relative strength to the S&P 500. XLK, the technology sector, above the 50 and the 200. Nice little consolidation. continues to move higher. Note the relative strength, still in a nice trend upward. We did see a little inflection lower on Thursday, Friday, but overall XLK and technology is looking good for the NASDAQ 100 as well. XLV is turning higher, relative strength to the S&P 500. We have the 50 period right overhead, and then the 200 period right here at 72. Consumer discretionary looking pretty good. Remember, we have a Santa Claus rally in the near future possibly. Spending over the next several weeks and months going into the end of the year. Prices above both the 50 and the 200. So you might want to look at this sector as well for some possible setups. Here is the new IBD50 list. We can sort out which ones are new. We're going to sort these by percent change. Note which sectors look the best. AFSI, remember we were talking about financials. Let's look at the relative strength to the S&P. Surging higher, we got this overhead level that we're probably going to test. Looking pretty good. Price above the 10 EMA. Note the volume by price level up here. The Kirby still turning back up. MACD is positive. Looking very good on AFSI. Let's take a look at the Ichimoku version just for curiosity. Kumo breakout and continues to surge higher. Note that Chiku is just now emerging above Kumo. So that all bodes well for the bullish bias on AFSI. Another financial sector component, Bank of the Ozarks, smaller bank, bounced off of the moving averages here and continue to move higher. Note where the volume by price is and check earnings dates. Still turning up, MACD is positive. Another sector we pointed out, XLK, technology, CDW continues to move higher. Let's take a look. Looking at relative strength to the S&P 500, we can clearly see a trend higher. Cal-Maine Foods, CALM, taking out those recent highs. We've been taking our time waiting for this. Prices into the Kirby. There's no overhead supply. This is probably earnings related. I would just check that out. MACD is positive. Slow still turns up. Nice volume. And Bollinger Bands are starting to expand at the top. Cambrex in the specialty chemicals sector, not the most sexy stock in the world, but trying to get above this volume by price band. Stowe is turning up and MACD is positive. Cirrus Logic looks like it's trying to break this downtrend, get back above the moving averages into this Kirby pocket and then move higher. XLK, a sector that we are going to keep an eye on this week. MACD is positive and Slow Stowe turned up. Cognizant Technologies, CTSH, didn't have the best week on Wednesday and Thursday. Above the volume by price support level, just below. That's a good sign if you're thinking long. The downside is probably around 64, the 50 period moving average. Just check earnings. Stowe is completely oversold and turning, and MACD's positive. This could take off this week, considering where sectors are. Constellation Brands, looks like this could move higher off the 10 period EMA. Slow Stowe's getting oversold. MACD's positive. 10E Stowe MACD setup on STZ. Edwards Life Sciences in the XLV sector, highly volatile, very high beta, and we can see 5 or 10 point ranges here. So you got to keep an eye on that. MACD's positive, Slow Stowe's turning back up. Nice volume. Hopefully some resolution in the near future for EW. EPAM, we're still in this one from Wednesday, looking pretty good above the 10 period EMA. EPAM's earnings are scheduled for November the 3rd. I haven't confirmed that yet, but looking good. Wednesday intraday, the stock took off, and after a bounce, we took some shares and then added on Thursday. Slow Stowe is turning up and MACD is positive. This looks like it could be a nice run into earnings if this continues. It is somewhat low volume, but we're watching this one nonetheless. Equifax added a couple of weeks ago, I believe, on IBD50. We had a nice move higher. Note the relative strength when the indices pulled back. This one just continued to move. And we have a nice, we're above recent highs. Just keep in mind Equifax reports after the bell on October 21st. Facebook reports on November the 4th at the upper Bollinger Band. Could see a little bit of resistance here. Despite the strength over the last couple of weeks, we could see a little bit of resistance here. MACD is above the zero line, positive, but overbought. Global Payments, another stock in the finance sector with earnings, I believe, January. Oh, they've already reported earnings. So we're post earnings, nice gap and go. Hasn't taken out this little low here, so this one looks like it's just going to continue to move higher. Slow Stow is turning and looking pretty good going into the week. GPN. Hawaiian Holdings reports Monday, October the 19th, tomorrow. Big surge last week and the week before at highs. They report after the bell, so I don't trade into earnings. If you have shares here, I'd be legging out on some of these. Stow is overbought. MACD is really positive. So you could always trade this post earnings with a gap and go. If it gaps up, just keep that in mind. Jack Henry, another name in the financial sector, above the volume by price resistance. You can see how when prices move above the Kirby, covered in one of the premium videos we uploaded recently, how prices just continue to blast higher. Stow is overbought and turning, and MACD is positive and above the zero line. Jack Henry reports November the 3rd. LGIH, one that Mikey likes to trade in the home builders and real estate shares sector, IYR. We pointed that out when reviewing sectors. That one looks pretty good. This will probably continue to move higher. Slow Stow's oversold now and turning. We might take a shot at this one this week as well, as LGIH doesn't report until November 5th, pre-market 6:30, so keep that in mind. Manhattan Associates, nice to see that this one broke higher without us, sarcastically speaking. Note the volume by price, there's no overhead supply at this point, 52-week highs, one of the reasons why we like to trade same. And earnings are not until Tuesday, October 20th, after the close. So looks like we have resistance overhead. I'd be legging out of this one as well. Nice looking stock. Hopefully we'll get a chance. Perhaps it's a gap and go and we can trade it with that strategy from the book. Maximus, MMS, also from the financial sector in the business support services industry group, moving higher. Stow turning back up, MACD positive. Maximus reports on November the 12th, 6:30 a.m. pre-market. MSCC, another stock in the semiconductors and XLK industry groups and sector. Trying to take this level out. It reports on November 5th after hours. Nice volume. Slow Stow turning back up, MACD positive. This one probably someone knows something. I checked to see what the institutional holdings are like and also insider trading if there's any. Purchases would be a good sign. NTES, this is one Mikey took last week in his 401k, looking pretty good here. Nice surge over the last 3 weeks. It reports November the 11th after hours. Slow Stow's turning back up, nice volume. MACD is positive and above the zero line, looking very good here. Note the volume by price resistance overhead. That will likely halt prices. Best case scenario, it flags out here on NTES. Nike, another positive sector. The XLY, consumer discretionary, looking really good. I guess it also trades in the XRT retail sector. Nice little pennant pattern, breakout, moving higher. Slow Stow getting a little bit overbought now, and MACD positive. Nice volume. Post earnings play on Nike. So this one looks really good. Noah Holdings continuing to move higher. Asset managers in the finance group as well. Noah reports November the 10th. Starting to form the right side of a cup. Slow Stow's turning back up. MACD's positive. Nice 10 Stow MACD setup here. Note this little wick here on the candle, but I don't think that's really going to be a problem. You have a lot more to this Kirby. And again, November 10th, you got a few weeks before to be looking for resistance up here around previous support turn resistance when price dropped down through here in June. O'Reilly looking pretty interesting as well. Above the 10 EMA, it reports October 28th, so we've got 10 days, 9 days if you count starting Monday. Slow turning up, MACD positive, nice volume. Only trades around 450,000 shares average, so keep that in mind. But this is a nice 10 Stow MACD setup for the week ahead on O'Reilly, and earnings are 10 days away. Paycom reports November 3rd after hours, breaking above recent highs, 52-week highs. But there's no overhead resistance. Slow's turning up, MACD positive. This is one we might take a look at if we can get a little pullback into Friday's candle. Public Storage, a specialty REIT, reports October 28th, 10 days from now, breaking out of this pennant pattern, 10E Stow MACD setup for the next few trading days. We have 9 days to go starting on Monday. Red Hat trading post earnings, similar to NetEase. Remember this volume by price overhead resistance. We're starting to see that now. Possibly a setup here. Slow. I'd like to see it back down to 50 before taking it, but MACD's positive, decent volume, a little bit of selling on Friday. Trending higher. All the moving averages are starting to turn. The 10 is above the 20 and the 30, and the 50 looks like it wants to turn as well. So we get above this level, perhaps you have a nice runner here on Red Hat post earnings. SS&C Technologies, Technology, XLK, remember that sector. November 2nd is when they report after hours. It's Monday. Prices above the 10 EMA, slow turning, MACD positive, above the zero line, could get back above its signal line very shortly. Look for a surge in volume. This one could go as well. Signet Jewelers in the retail sector, XRT. We didn't cover that one, but this one looks pretty interesting going into Christmas. We have earnings November 24th before the bell on a Tuesday. So we're a few weeks out. Slow is getting to oversold. That could set up well. As prices, we see a little spinning top on Friday. AOS in the building materials and the IYR sector that we covered earlier. It reports earnings on October 21st, pre-market on Wednesday. MACD's positive, slow's turning up, so maybe we get a gap and go on this one from the book. If you don't know how to trade these, just check out the book where we cover a lot of these. We've also been uploading a lot of videos lately. This strategy right here is probably one that every trader needs. Video number 5, which we uploaded on Friday. I've traded AOS before. Really like this stock. Notice how the volume by price tapers off. It's above the 10 EMA. Slow's turning. MACD is positive. SolarWinds Software. Nice flag, breaking higher. Not something that you want to chase at this point, obviously. It reports earnings as well on October 28th after the bell on Wednesday, 2 weeks. 10 days from now. Slow is in the red zone and MACD is positive. Wait for this one to pull back a little bit. Probably not a good time. We have volume by prices moving a lot above, but it's something to consider over the next 10 trading days. We have earnings. Starbucks reports on October 29th after the bell on a Thursday. Moving higher above the volume by price levels. No overhead resistance per se. Breaking above levels. Stow is trying to turn. Nice volume. MACD is positive. Tesoro also looks very interesting. Nice to see all of these stocks in the IBD50 for the most part setting up very well. That's a good sign. Tesoro reports on October 28th. So 9 trading days starting Monday. MACD positive, slow still turning up. This might be one we're interested in trading as well on Monday. Note very little overhead supply now, and we have this 110 level. Maybe we get 5 points out of this before earnings on October 28th. Total System Services, TSS, another financial sector name. Nice little pennant, looks like it's going to break out. Stow looks like it wants to turn, and MACD is positive. And this company reports on October 27th, Tuesday, after the bell, so the following week on Tuesday. Visa reports October 29th after the bell on a Thursday next week. At recent highs, slow stow near the red zone and MACD positive. Nice volume building up here. Interesting to note on Visa. Okay, traders, so that's going to do it for me for the weekend. This is Cousin Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com. If you're a new trader in search of knowledge, we have a lot to offer. This is a free website. It's spam free. Just enter your email in here and click subscribe. Also recently released a book which is put together in a mentor student teacher format. Very supportive for the mindset for a new trader. We also have premium videos that you might want to check out that highlight the strategies that we use to trade the indices, which highlight strategies we use to trade on a daily basis. All of these are supportive of the book and something you might want to consider, from the opening range strategy through the Kirby, Bollinger Band, Keltner, TTM squeeze setup and strategy, as well as the 10E Stow MACD setup, and most recently our ultimate indicator, which is the tick and trend, which we use on a daily basis. Take care. I hope this helps, and we'll talk to you on Monday.